Small breeding herd off on the left there. A couple of youngsters. Look like they might be rolling around in the dust as well. But otherwise, a little bit stationary. I wonder if they've already had their drink and cool off. No, they're just hanging around. Birds that are calling, it sounds like a ringneck dove or the old Cape turtle dove, as well as what I think is an Indian myna. The other call that's there. Well, so Catherine, you hoping for some heat where you are, nicely snowed in and very cold. Well, sometimes when it's very hot like this, we wish we could swap, but I'll definitely take the heat over the cold. That's for sure. So those two having a wrestle there, they do seem of similar age. They're probably around 10 to 12 years of age or so, somewhere abouts. And so, very important for them to be practicing as they are for when they get a bit older, and they'll have to put that into proper use. So, Starbuck, elephants, I wouldn't say are naturally buoyant. They do sink pretty well in the water, and I've seen when they're sort of crossing rivers and such. When they cross rivers and that, they very quickly go completely under the water, and so they don't really float that well, I would say. And whenever they go in the water here, they roll about in it and don't really float much at all. So I would say no, that they're not naturally buoyant as such. So there's lovely audio of these elephants as they're spraying themselves under their bellies, behind their ears, over their sides, as well as onto their backs as well. As much mud as possible, and then it sticks to them nicely and keeps them cool and fresh for longer. It's a small impala moving through here in the foreground. But if you look at elephants as a whole, there are so many adaptations that they have for thermoregulation, especially around the heat. So lots of wrinkles in their skin, increasing the surface area, so that any wind and so on can really cool them off. And also when they're spraying themselves with mud like this, really does then assist in keeping them cool. And those massive ear flaps also, I think, pretty much all down to thermoregulation and helping them pass lots of cool air over those ears with lots of blood running through it. So it assists in cooling the blood going to the brain. So elephants dominating once again, and they dotted all over the place. And those youngsters still flat out in their wrestling match. A couple of zebra moving in as well, bringing on the stripes. Looks like one might be pushed up into the water there. Needs to push back now.
Africam's YouTube channel delivers daily doses of enchanting wildlife moments. Experience highlights captured live from our cameras to stay informed about the wildlife action. Dive into the immersive world of Africam's YouTube membership community. Engage in live chats, express yourself with custom emojis and badges, and unlock exclusive behind-the-scenes content. Subscribe to Africam's YouTube channel today and become part of a wildlife-loving community.
And the wrestling match continues as the female with these two youngsters look like they're going to come in for a drink. But they might make their way all the way around to where that fresh water is coming out. That's generally what they do. They might stop for a splash, quickly cool off, and then head for a drink. And as we pan across, that's another favored scratching post, that tree that's lying down. It's obviously been there for quite some time, and the elephants really make good use of it. They need to scratch their legs and their bellies, and sometimes also their bums. So, and these impala also just in the foreground, just in the corner there. It looks like they're making good use of the new grass growth. And there may be a bit of geophagia taking place as well. They do like eating the soil there, getting mineral salts and their supplements. There we go. Nice view in on this little herd. All females, it looks like, of impala. With so much elephant activity over the last while, the other animals have actually found it quite difficult to get down to the water and drink. Although today it doesn't seem as like there's as many elephants, but that might change as the day gets hotter. A bit of low rumbles there in communication between these elephants. So, Stefan, thanks for your question. And yes, I have been fortunate enough to be able to feel elephant skin. Um, Fortunate to feel it, but unfortunately, it was on a dead elephant. But it was still quite fresh. It had to be put down because it charged a trails group. It was a female. There were actually two of them that charged the trails group as they were walking through a drainage line. And these elephant, the whole herd of them came on one of the banks and was through Mopani thickets. And one of the what I call the bodyguard younger females in the breeding herds broke off from the herd and came down into the drainage line. So the group moved off onto the other side as quickly as they could. But this elephant came at them and it came up the other side of the bank. And as it came within 5 meters of the group, they put it down. It was obviously not mock charge. It was showing all the signs of that it was going to try and flatten them as the herd tried to, disappear from the threat. And that's often what they do. And the lead trails guide obviously realized that it was either the elephant or them. And in that situation, yeah, it's very unfortunate, but he had to keep the safety of the group first and foremost. So that happened. And then the Kruger Park rangers, the management, they came in and they checked all the evidence from the tracks, etc., and the story from the group as well as from the ranger that unfortunately had to put it down. And agreed that it was actually the only option. So the group was obviously very traumatized, and so was the ranger, so much so that they called me in to replace him. And a couple of days after that, then we went to go and look at the site, just for my sake, and just to see the evidence. I've never had to put any animals down. But I've been very close a few times. But I always am very interested in every trails guide's sort of close encounter, and what they did, and then try and work out what they did right, what they did wrong. Every situation's different, so you could never say what you could have done. Hindsight's 2020. Anyway, that aside, went in, and the hyenas had been in. There was quite a lot of scavenging activity, so they'd fed on the elephant quite substantially and opened it up quite a bit. But its skin was obviously still there and still fresh. So I managed to feel the skin. I managed to also sort of look at their foot structure and dispel a couple of myths, such as that they walk on the whole foot, which is incorrect. They walk on their fingers and their toes. So they, what we would say, digitigrade. But with the skin, it's remarkably rough. And I almost liken it to a sort of roughly laid concrete floor where it's quite grainy, almost almost like sandpaper. It's incredibly rough and thick. It's about an inch and a half thick. I couldn't believe it. So the animals that were scavenging on it, it was opened up probably by the hyenas with their very strong jaws. But other than those spots where they had opened it up, everybody else had to just climb inside the carcass. And with that skin being so thick, I don't think there were or are many animals that would be able to actually bite through that, except for hyenas. So without them, they would have had to go in the small spaces, just as the eye and the anus and in the mouth, to be able to actually get the meat out. But with the help of the hyenas, where we have to then say that's a big advantage of having hyenas around, they do really assist in opening up carcasses for other animals as well. And on such a big carcass like an elephant, they're not going to be able to eat all of it, especially not in one sitting. So it does then make food available for a lot of different animals. We saw jackal activity. We even saw porcupine and bush pig that had all been feeding on it. And I think later on there were also lions that visited. So it really gets interesting around carcasses and then what comes from that. I've also seen that in Juma. There was a dead elephant. I think it died of other natural causes. Not sure exactly why. But for months, the predators were moving in there and going and feeding on it. And then even once we thought that the carcass was finished and there were just bones and a little bit of meat on it, but most of it had been scattered. But then after rains, it sort of releases that smell again, and then the hyenas come back again to feed on obviously because the smell is rejuvenated. So then they come in to get even more off of it. So one dead elephant can really feed innumerable animals. It's incredible. And another time I've also been able to feel elephant skin was on a more fortunate situation, but that was when they were doing vasectomies on the bull elephants in Salati Game Reserve, which is just outside of Hoedspruit. And that was by the Disney veterinarian team. And it was a sort of a pilot program. They had been doing it in all the zoos in America, and then they came and did it as a sponsored project in a number of game reserves in South Africa. And they came with they had two trucks and a helicopter. And they had a massive crane on the one truck, and then they would dart the elephant, and then they would strap it up. They weighed it, hanging upside down, and then they would stand it up. So, sort of changing the straps around, and then with the crane, pick it up and make it stand up. Because leaving it down, they do say that, and then slowly but surely start struggling to breathe. So they stand them up, and then the anesthetist puts pipes inside the mouth, um, and was supplying oxygen, um, and obviously monitoring the heart rate. And on the back of the truck, the whole veterinarian team were working, and they went in the side of the elephant, remembering that elephants have also got internal testes, but they were sort of looking for the tube. And they cut a piece out of this tube, but they used revolutionary equipment. And the surgeon, he was wearing goggles that he could see where with where they probed in, and the whole procedure was done through these goggles that were sort of feeding the line from the camera that was had the apparatus to do the procedure as well. So it was incredible to watch. But I was assisting the anesthetist, and I was helping to hold open the ears so that they could put in all the injections and things, and that's where they were obviously supplying all the drugs. Was administered behind the ear of the elephant. So, yeah, even the skin of the ears on the inside is very rough, but that's probably one of the softest spots on the elephant. Is behind those big ear flaps. So I got to see all those the blood network and everything right up close and impersonal, and also the smell of elephants. It's something that I find difficult to explain, but I'll never ever forget that smell of being right up next to it. Dogs, shut up! Sorry about that, folks. I was just reprimanding my dogs and I didn't mute myself. Excuse me.
Are you in search of a unique, unforgettable adventure in the wild? Imagine living with the animals you see on TV while getting an inside look at how a live safari TV show operates. We're thrilled to offer this experience through our 7, 14 and 28-day EcoCam experiences. To book your spot, visit wildearth.tv/EcoCam. Come and join us for the bush experience of a lifetime.
So it's probably a harem, one harem with this group of zebra that is just coming through. And you can almost, like, if you look at them, um, that would be one harem, most likely. The stallions don't like letting the females move off on their own, especially when there's other zebra around. And so you'll see if we look at the other zebra as well, they'll also sort of group up as they come down to the water. And then the stallions are hard at work trying to sort of maintain that harem of females. Because this is where the potential for males stealing other females is the highest, and the risk for them losing one of theirs. So they do try and keep them all rounded up and kept together. Oh, and there's a Jerry, Mr. Giraffe, also going to come down and try and get himself a drink. You might sort of move in close with these zebra, generally feel a little bit safer when they're around other animals. So just hit midday, and so it's probably nearing the hottest part of the day. I don't think quite just yet is midday the hottest part, but it's there or thereabouts. And so this is generally when you see a lot of the animals moving through to come and have a drink. See that bull on the opposite side now? He's getting into that scratching post, having a scratch on his belly, and you can almost see the pleasure in it. I'm surprised sometimes you almost see them, their back legs go a little bit weak because they're obviously enjoying it so much. And the water levels have continued to drop over the last few days because it's been so hot. There's been a lot of extraction. These elephants, they can drink up to 300 liters of water in one go. So you can imagine with the other day we counted, it was around about 100 elephants. And so they can really suck out a lot of water really fast. So you can understand why it's going to take a bit of time for this waterhole to fill up again. We hope for rain. It really is needed. I hear also at the Pilansberg, which is not too far from here, also very, very dry. So the sooner the rain comes, the better. So emu, yes, they do have knees, but the thing is, with a lot of the animals, what we think is their knee is actually their ankle, and what we think then is the hip is actually the knee, with the hip being further up. And that's with especially the ungulates that walk on their toes, so their foot is raised. And so that first joint is actually what seemingly is the knee, but it's not. So it goes further up. So if you look at the elephant's sort of above the foot, that is that first sort of joint, that is the ankle, or the wrist. So the front legs, that would be the wrist, and then at the back it's the ankle, and then that knee. So this one that's right where in the middle, that one, so that is its ankle. But as we go higher up, then we would see the knee. And I'm gonna just pull up a lovely picture of an elephant and try and explain it nicely to you. So give me 1 second. Right. So what you would say is that elephants have pretty much the same joints as us, as humans. So their front knee um, is what we would, think would be their wrist, but the elbows and their back knees are right at the body line. So it's higher up, and the ankle in the back doesn't move very much. So I don't know which side of the argument you were on with that question, whether they do have knees or not. But the answer is that they do have knees, absolutely. So yeah, on the back leg, it's actually easier to see where the knee is, um, because it's where you would expect it to be, and it bends sort of the same as us. But the front knee sort of bends backwards. You see there on the front leg, so it's much higher up. There, that second joint, that first one down the bottom, that would be its wrist, and then further up is where the knee is. But we would say on the front legs, that's its elbow, and then the knee, obviously, at the back, which is quite evident and quite easy to see. And then you can also see very soft padded feet, almost increase in surface area, helping them to be able to walk through different substrates like mud and sand, but also hard enough to be able to walk on rocks and all sorts. So elephants can really walk through a range of different substrates, not easily getting stuck, especially adults. And they can also they can climb mountains. Some areas that I've seen elephant dung, I've never seen them on top of the mountains, but the places that I've found elephant dung in the Namib Desert is incredible, and mainly going up on top of those mountains in winter, and to access the comifera, or the canidoets, as we call them in Afrikaans. These It's the same family as the velvet-leafed corkwood that you would get in these parts, but they're much smaller. But the elephants also go for the velvet-leaf corkwood in these areas, much bigger tree, but for the same reason. They push those trees over to get to the roots, because there's a lot of sugars in those roots, and obviously in winter when there's not much else around, then they start going for plants like that. In the Namib Desert, in the Rocky Desert, Damaraland, Kokaland, they go on top of those mountains and they pull those. They're not trees, but they're like bushes, and they pull the whole thing out, and then they eat the roots. And we call them canidoets, or cannot dies, because in winter they literally lose their leaves and they look like they're dead, and they just look like these dead branches that are there. But then in winter, in summer after the rains, they have a beautiful burst of life. So that's why they call them cannot dies. They look dead, but they come back to life immediately after the rains. But an excellent food source for the elephants, especially when there's not much else around. And I think one of the reasons why they still survive in those areas with very little resources. So the giraffe now trying to sneak in a drink here. Always nervous, always anxious, especially when they put that head down. And look at those two bulls just watching it. Yeah, they're a bit nervous of the giraffe, I think. Come on, Jerry, now's your chance. Get in there. And he's got to stretch even further because he's not at the best spot. It's quite high up off the water there. There's quite a bank. So he's got to stretch even further. Same. We'll try and get the camera in there nice and close. There we go. That looks really awkward. But you got to drink if you're a giraffe. So this being the southern giraffe, and we have the potential for seeing three different species of giraffe. Here, the southern giraffe, which is pretty much the most common in southern Africa. But if we go to Etosha and Okukuyu, we have the chance of seeing the Angolan, or the Damara giraffe, which is the smallest of all the giraffe species. And then if we go to Oldonyo in Kenya, that would be the Maasai giraffe. and the largest of all of the giraffe species.
This immersive program will give you an in-depth understanding of the African bush in as little as 7 days. You'll be guided by expert trainers who will lead you through the various ecosystems of Africa and teach you essential bush skills. Join Eco Training's 7 or 14-day EcoQuest course and you will receive 500 Rand off whether you sign up locally or internationally using this promo code. Further your journey as a true bush enthusiast today.
So it's another one of the things that you can tell the age of these little babies, and they're able to use their trunk properly. Comes at about a year of age, but it doesn't immediately set in. It takes a lot of practice, and they learn how to use their trunk. Before that, drinking with their mouth from both their mum and from the water. My favorite sort of pose when the elephants are doing this and playing and spraying in the water is when they throw their trunk straight over right between their eyes, and they throw it on top of their head. That for me is the best. Is this one slippy slidey coming up the bank, but managed to get there. So Jenna from the UK, lovely to have you on board with us, as we've got lots of votes here. So I would say probably the best detectors of water are the elephants, because they have such an excellent sense of smell. So both detecting water beneath the surface of the soil, and then they're able to dig it out, as well as rains in the distance. They can also smell that and move in that direction. So I've seen it most notably in Namibia because of the elephants really have to move to where the water is there. Um, so in the dry season, they go into the ephemeral rivers and they're able to access the water where there is still water under the ground, and they dig it up. They make sort of water points where a lot of the other animals will then come and access it as well once the elephants have exposed it. Um, we also then know from the understanding of these elephants in those parts that when they leave the ephemeral rivers, and we notice that the herds all of a sudden, almost in synchronized, that they leave the riverbeds and go inland, and then the rivers start flowing a few days after that. And the reason they do that, we believe, is that because it becomes very dangerous for the babies. They can get washed away. They can also get stuck in the mud. So the elephants, with knowledge and experience of these rivers, they understand when they smell that rain off in the distance, they move inland, and in so doing mitigate the risk of hanging about in those rivers. And they also move in the direction of those rains. We see that in Etosha, where they'll move from the area around Okokuyo. They move to the east, where the rains normally come first, and they move across the reserve towards the west. But the elephants move in that direction well before the rains come. So it's like and every year is different. And they'll move just before the rains arrive into those areas. So they definitely can smell it, I'm pretty sure. That little bird call there sounds to me like it could be a long-billed crombeck. Small little bird without a tail, or very, very short little tail. Funny looking things, but say long-billed crombeck, but it's a crombeck because it's got a sort of a skew bill. So that's where the crombeck comes in, Afrikaans word. But it's making that grr, 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 grr. Oh, something must have been said that was disagreeable there. See, elephants can also have disagreements, and they do then sometimes have to sort it out. Probably around the competition for that little flow of water that's coming through. Now there's a bull arriving. He might take precedence, but we'll have to see. There's always someone bigger. You see there? Now this one's arrived. He's going to take over. And he's shown that bull that just had a bit of a charge at that female on his way. You can see there's also a bit of communicating with their front leg, how they swing it like that when they're having a disagreement. For us as Trails Guide, we say that when they do that, when you're in a standoff with an elephant and they swing the front leg like that, a charge is imminent. So we normally try and change their minds at that point, whether it's just making a noise or shouting or, or at least talking to it, just to change its mind from the thought of charging. Wow, that was quite a noticeable trumpet as this next bull makes his way in. So, Stefan, thanks for your question again. No, I've never been charged by, well, actually, not on bushwalk. Giraffe, it's almost quite amusing. They're so scared of you. They're such big animals. It's almost it's probably lucky us that they don't have the brain or the mind to be aggressive towards anything except other giraffe. The only other thing that I've ever seen a giraffe be aggressive to, there was a big bull. I think he might have been frustrated, maybe not being successful in being dominant with other giraffe or what, I don't know. But he was obviously very frustrated. And for some reason took it out on a little baby impala and actually stamped it to death. So that was very unusual, though. I've never seen that kind of behavior, and we couldn't understand it. But for whatever reason, that was what happened. But on bushwalk giraffes, they just run away. The only sort of aggressive giraffe that I have encountered, and it's been a few times, is in captivity. And it's also bulls. And I'm pretty sure that it's frustration because they didn't have any females or other males to fight with and females to mate with. So we used to have this one game reserve that I was the manager of in the Eastern Cape. They had hand reared a giraffe. I think it was an orphan giraffe or something. I don't know the history of it. But anyway, it was an area that we used to have to go to where this giraffe was in an enclosure. It had everything it needed and whatnot, but it was obviously just very frustrated. And it used to mount the Land Rover and try and mate with it. So that's how frustrated it was. But obviously, it used to sort of dent the vehicle, crack the windscreen. There was multiple occasions where he really damaged the vehicle. So we had to be very careful when we went there. It started to become quite a problem. And another one, it was also not in captivity, but there was one giraffe on a local reserve up the Cowie River near to Port Alfred. And we often go up on the boat, and then we braai there, and we have a picnic. But this giraffe would always come and sort of harass us. I think it was just, for company. He used to stick his head over the fence and want to pull the meat off of the braai. It was really strange. He was almost like he was going carnivorous. But yeah, he used to do that, and as I say, and follow us, and it was getting quite dangerous for the kids. But yeah, those are the only occasions where I've encountered aggressive giraffe, and it's quite scary because I appreciate when we walk towards giraffe on bushwalk, they just run away. They're very scared.
What if you could explore the world from an entirely new perspective? Flying a real drone live without leaving home. This is Nature Eye. Discover our planet's landscapes with a personal guide and a powerful camera. Every flight helps conserve the locations you visit. Book your adventure with Nature Eye.
There's still lots of splashing about, getting that mud mixed up nicely in the water so that it will stick to the elephants a lot better. You can see this individual just relaxing, putting its trunk down, having some quiet time. So another mom and a little baby arriving. Well, the one breeding herd is hanging up in the shade. There's a few dotted about, some just seeking shade, some still in the water, and of course some bulls still drinking. So just with that question around the giraffe being aggressive, I've just been trying to find if there's any sort of reports on aggressive giraffe, and it seems like most of it has occurred in more zoo-like conditions or safari park conditions, and hand-reared animals, etc. But I found a report on the New York Post which says that a giraffe trampled a toddler to death and left the child's mother fighting for her life after a rare attack at a South African safari park, which, as I've mentioned, seems like where most of these kind of incidents have occurred. The 16-month-old girl and 25-year-old mum were rammed at Kuleni Game Park in KwaZulu-Natal. And this was in 2023. The child was taken to the nearest doctor's room where she passed away. The mom, who was not identified, was hospitalized in critical condition, but they say that the deadly attack came without warning and possibly because the giraffe was protecting a calf. Could be, but once again, it's in this kind of captive like scenario. I say that the mom was a tour guide at the resort. So, obviously, out of the blue, they do say that giraffe attacks are rare. Um, and according to this, most commonly happen when females are protecting their calves. I would say more so when bulls are frustrated and they don't have other bulls to fight with or females to mate with. And that's when I've, in my own personal experience, have seen their behavior and the potential for them being aggressive and dangerous. I think if you look at animals across the board, we need to maintain the fear for humans, because as soon as animals lose their fear of humans, they become dangerous. A, a prime example is the baboons at Cape Point. If any of you have ever been there, I went there sort of 30 years ago, and at that time, the baboons, they sort of weren't scared of people, but they were not at the level that they're at now. If you go to Cape Point now, you that is the most dangerous animal that you will come across is a baboon, because they're not scared of humans. They've been fed by tourists, and now they're a nuisance. They can attack you for your bag, for your food, for whatever. So when tourists and that buy takeaways, even an ice cream or whatever, the baboons can literally attack you for that. They jump on people's cars, they break off their windscreen wipers, they break their rear view mirrors, um, and it's a problem because socially, it's not really acceptable that the rangers shoot them, because ultimately, when they do become a nuisance like that, you do need to shoot a couple of them to sort of break them up and restore the fear. Because left unchecked, you're going to have accidents where humans actually get injured and goodness forbid, but you could even be killed by a big male baboon. His teeth are, pretty much the size of that of lions. So if a big male baboon bites you, you can do a lot of damage. And they are very aggressive. If you don't give them what they want, they will become aggressive. And if you've ever been to Cape Point, you'll understand why. Now, I don't want to turn you away from going down there, but just an understanding from the perspective of that we need to maintain fear. And I've spoken to a lot of the rangers, and they do actually want to shoot a couple to restore that fear. But there's a big lobby in Cape Town to stop that. They don't want that happening. which is understandable as well. But when you understand baboons fully, um, we need to restore that fear. Otherwise, they are very dangerous. And stories of baboons attacking people at the touristy sites is not a good advertisement for South Africa. So it's not only for the people's sake, it's for the economic input of tourists coming there. And if tourists get scared to go to Cape Point because of these rogue baboons, it's an issue. But the problem is created by humans, and now so it's a difficult one to solve once they get to this point without sort of going all the way and shooting them. So they walk around with catties, or what we call, or catapults, and they just try and scare them off. But they've gotten to the point where they almost won't be scared. So they almost need to up the level of trying to scare them. So, but it's a tough one. So not only is losing the fear of humans that becomes a problem, it's also when they associate us with food. And that's what the baboons are doing with both those instances. It's the same with the likes of shark cage diving, and with them, sort of also linking that to more shark attacks. I think on one side, yes, definitely, because now, the sharks are associating humans with food. And they bait and to bring those sharks to the boat, and then they leave, and sometimes those sharks could be in a feeding frenzy, and then anybody surfing nearby could find himself being eaten as well. So it's a tough one. You associate with food, and the animals aren't scared of you anymore, then we're in trouble. And with elephants out on bushwalk, there is a real element of them having a fear for you, regardless of it being a big bull elephant in must, whatever it might be. I think his fear diminishes when he's in must a little bit, but he still understands that we're an apex predator and we are to be feared. And very often you'll find the breeding herds, they'll run away from you. Lions run away from us. Most animals will just literally run away. It's when they sort of feel that you're a real threat, and they need to defend themselves that you can get yourself into problems. But mostly all the animals out there are scared of us and will run away. Even in these sort of wild game reserves, generally that's what we find when we're out on bushwalk.
Eco Training's professional field guide course can make your dreams a reality. This comprehensive program comprises 5 months of theoretical and practical training in the African bush with highly qualified instructors in multiple locations. Enroll today and receive 5,000 Rand off using the promo code. If you've just finished school or tertiary education and you want to head into the wild, Eco Training's professional field guide course is for you.
So the ebb and flow continues. Some animals leaving. I'm sure we'll see some new ones arriving, and some hanging around, some in the shade, and just your average day at the waterhole. And that little youngster on the opposite bank, he's having a little roll around, a play in the dirt. So, just having spoken a little bit on the baboons of Cape Point, I found a lovely article and it's called Cape of Primates, Cape Point's Chacma Baboons. And they write it everywhere, and every now and then they write, don't feed the Chacma baboons, because this is probably the biggest problem with the baboons is people feeding them, not the actual baboons themselves, but they do become a huge problem. And they say this is a story of the farmer who dressed up as his wife. Of all the stories about baboons of the Western Cape, perhaps the most interesting is the one about the farmer who tried to trick a meddlesome troop by putting on his wife's dress and a wig. Baboons are notorious chauvinists. They are, says Professor Robert Sapolsky, the textbook example of a highly aggressive male dominated hierarchical society. What's really interesting is that this sexist behavior isn't just limited to the animal's internal social interactions. They, it sounds like a rock pigeon that's calling now. They affect how the baboons react to humans too. When a troop of baboons sees a male human approach, they will sense a threat. Even young boys are treated with a measure of respect. But women are either ignored or even attacked by larger males. In the early 1900s, a Cape Town farmer who lived in the area between Meisenberg and Steenberg was harassed by a troop of baboons. One day, his daughter was attacked by a baboon, and his wife had to drag the girl behind closed doors to get to safety. This was the final straw. The farmer decided to seek revenge. He loaded his gun and set off to destroy the alpha male of the offending troop. But every time the farmer spotted the baboons and moved into position, the animals ran away. His wife, on the other hand, remained soundly ignored. There's a saying in South Africa, a boer maak 'n plan. A farmer will always make a plan or an ingenious solution. So the farmer put on his wife's dress, hid his rifle in the folds, and approached the troops, or the troop. The baboons, to their credit, were not fooled. The moment the burly woman produced a rifle, they ran away. But the fact that baboons are well aware of the differences between male and female humans remains a well documented fact, and one which the farmer attempted to use to his advantage. But he didn't come right. But a good idea anyway. And they say again, don't feed the baboons. In the baboons of Cape Point, there's 5 distinct troops of baboons there. Cape Point, Buffels Bay, Kanonkop, Klein Olifantsbos, Groot Olifantsbos, and they range from between 14 to over 30 members per troop. The largest troop currently is the Kanonkop troop. When an alpha male is challenged, this is done by a young social climber, usually from another troop, which keeps the gene pool diversified. Interestingly, at times the challenger is aided by males from the alpha troop or the alphas troop. These opportunists have been known to challenge or change allegiance according to who is winning. They may initially attack the alpha, but if they see that the challenger is going to lose, then they also turn against the challenger and begin to fight on the alpha's side. And we just listen to this, what I think is a rock pigeon. probably on the roof of the lodge. We had a pair of rock pigeons that nested in the ceiling just outside of our bedroom window, and they used to do this every single day. I tell you, at the end, I also wanted to do like this farmer did with the baboons and get my gun out. Because they can continue on with that for hours, very early in the morning, and sometimes till late at night as well. And that is the typical sound of a pigeon. I'm not sure if it's a ramron or a rock pigeon, most likely a rock pigeon. To continue, so that sort of swapping of sides is an example of real politic in the wild, if you would. So the alpha either defeats the challenger and mutineer, or he is defeated. In that case, a new alpha male emerges and he kills all the offspring of the previous alpha male. You let the pigeon have his say. So, as I was saying, so the alpha either defeats the challenger and mutineer, or he's defeated. Let the pigeon have his say. In that case, a new alpha male emerges and he kills all the offspring of the previous alpha male. This may seem like an unnecessarily harsh or cruel behavior, but it's done to preserve the diversity of the gene pool and keep the troops healthy in the long run. We see this with a lot of animals, from zebra to lions, and here also with baboons. The baboons of Cape Point are the only ones of their species that forage for seafood. They eat crabs from the tidal pools, bite off the top of limpet shells that attach themselves to the rocks in order to get at the juicy flesh inside, and they feast on the millions of flea-like beach hoppers that swarm under the rotting kelp on the shore. But it's not the only diet which makes the baboons of Cape Point unique. Once again, don't feed the baboons. Unlike their closest suburban cousins in Kommetjie and the troops along the cliffs of False Bay, the Cape Point baboons have been protected since 1939. This has given them both tameness and confidence that has endeared them to visitors at the park. Of course, an instinctive human reaction to the baboons is to want to interact with them. And the easiest way to interact with them is to feed them. But there are very good reasons why you shouldn't. There are the obvious reasons, that they might begin to see humans as a ready source of food, that it might disrupt their natural foraging habits and ability, that some human food might be harmful to them. And these are all true, but there's a more immediate threat that isn't quite as apparent. We know that a baboon troop is organized according to a very strict hierarchy, with a dominant alpha male at the top, and below him a gang of different younger males, and below them an internal hierarchy of females, and finally at the very bottom their offspring. That is to say, the offspring of the dominant alpha, who is the only one allowed to mate with the females. Feeding and foraging is a daily ritual which is led by the alpha male. It is he who wakes first. Baboons are notorious late sleepers. Each troop has a number of preferred sleeping places. And it is he who decides what time to set off on the day's quest for food. Baboon feeding is more or less an individual activity, but when a particularly rich source of food is encountered, then it is important that the alpha male eats first. Then the rest of the troop can tuck in order of seniority. When humans come into contact with baboons, they usually want to feed the babies and docile females. That's because these are usually the most accessible, the cutest, and least threatening. It's also because humans usually encounter entire baboon troops when they are engaged in social activities like grooming or playing. The main problem is that when the male sees the males and the young eating before him, he sees the entire strict hierarchy of the troop being subverted. He will feel the need to re-establish his dominance in the troop, either by challenging the humans or by punishing the insubordinate females and young, or both. So by feeding the males and the young first, humans are flipping the social hierarchy on its head, often with tragic consequences as the alpha metes out harsh punishments on the transgressors. So while it may seem like an innocent mistake on a person's part with benefits for baby baboons and mothers, it is in fact a most heinous crime. So please don't feed the baboons. Don't feed any wild animals, in fact, please. It does not help them. And in fact, like we've just seen a good example with baboons, you can actually mess them around more than anything.
Do you want to know more about our feathered friends? Join Cedric and Gabe for a Birding Big Day fireside chat this festive season.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Cedric Dahl.
Come along for interesting conversations about birds and how we can give conservation wings.
Incredible.
Watch it live on your nearest device. WildEarth, it's in your nature.
Another mom and baby making their way through, and some more zebbies just filing in down to the water. So it seems that female with the tiny little baby there has gone over to that tree that they also like using as a scratching point or post. Not quite sure what she's up to. Maybe she was just giving the baby a chance to have a little rest, and now she's heading on. But there's still lots of scratching going on that favored post, just off on the right there a little bit. Quite a bit of rolling around in the mud, spraying, splashing, all sorts happening. Getting that mud nicely mixed up there. And here in the foreground, these are all bulls. You see that one off on the left, just resting its trunk over its tusk. It's also one of the sort of ways that you can tell when a bull is in must, when they often do that. And the way that they walk is very menacing as well. But when it's hot and in the middle of the day like this, and they're just sort of relaxing with their trunk over their tusks, it's not necessarily indicative of it being in must. It's just at rest, and sometimes they like to rest their trunk over their tusk like that. You see those ellies in the background there, sort of fighting for little bits of shade, trying to keep cool. That's generally the modus operandi for this time of the day, especially for the elephants, but most of the animals in general as well. Take this time and just try and relax a little bit, maybe rest up a bit, and try to keep cool. Right, so it is time for us also to include all of the Africam waterholes. So very exciting. I wonder what's going on at all of those different locations. And I'm sure that we're going to find probably elephants as well. But who knows? We'll have to wait and see.